Hey, what's going on, guys? So next video, I figured I talk a lot about attacks and spend a lot of the time on attacks on my videos. And I feel like a lot of teams, obviously, because of the game and everything, they just suffer a lot from understanding attacks, and it seems like people don't really understand how to break down attacks and stuff like that. So I just wanted to create this video going through attacks. Um, that way, maybe this can help some people out breaking some stuff down. I forgot to add that before the video. All right, so I did want to start this video with this interview because I thought it was good, number one, and two, he kind of talks about a couple of things that I've talked about on the channel. So if you don't want to watch this, I'll put it in the timestamp of like when it's over. That way you can just watch the video.
Personally, you've had a rough journey as well. For the viewers out there that don't really know who you are, I mean, you got replaced. You were out of Pro League. What happened to you before you even got back to this point, man? You were MIA for a while.
Yeah, I've definitely had like a rough past like coming before going into Mirage. There was just some differences of opinions on different teams, or just some things didn't work out, which is to be expected. That's going to happen on some teams. But I think I've taken what I've learned from getting kicked on previous teams, and I've really just worked on my mental state. I've really worked on who I am as a person. I've really just worked on becoming a leader, and I think that's something that I'm very proud of, to be honest. This season, like statistically, I haven't been playing great, but honestly, coming into this season, that wasn't my objective. My objective coming into this season was to be a dominant IGL. I want people to know. Excuse me. I want people to know that I could be a top IGL. I'm not going to say I'm going to be up there with Canadian or Fabian or any of those top name players, but with time, I think anything can be possible.
You know what you're capable of, man. So I have to ask you, there's no way you sitting next to Benji, right? Or is that Hot Code? I sort of scream
right arms and just by his overall just
fourth season, and tell them what they should look forward to stage 2.
So yeah, I want to thank all the fans that have constantly supported us. I want to thank our supporters in Under Armour and just Mirage in general. The organization has been absolutely incredible. I want to thank our support staff in DNA and Guerra. I don't think they get enough enough credibility, attention that they should. And last but not least, I want to kind of take a little bit of time to thank all the teammates individually. I think Hot and Cold has been getting a lot of praise, right? Hot and Cold is a fantastic player. Everyone in North America knows, everyone in the world knows that Hot and Cold is a top player. I want to just give thanks to Dream, Loading, and Benji. They have played absolutely incredible. Loading has came into this season having to learn a new role. He's had to adapt. He's had to soak in a bunch of information, and he's been doing fantastic every single week. He's been learning and adapting every single week. Dream, without Dream, we would not be able to hold down our sights. Without Dream, our morale wouldn't be as high as it always is every single day. So shout out to Dream for just being the person that he is, and shout out to Benji just for being a hungry, young, talented player that has so much potential in the upcoming stages and upcoming tournaments. I think Benji is going to have a bright future in Siege. Shout out to all my team. I love those guys.
You know what, Nix? Thank you so much for that.
So I thought that interview was cool. Maybe other people didn't, but if you've been watching Rainbow Six long enough, you kind of know a little bit about his past, and he's been removed for some teams because he was either a little bit too toxic or whatever, behind the scenes stuff that I don't know about too much. But so he came into this season, and this is what we talked about, motivation. Ego is always a big problem in this game. He's come into this season with the mindset of becoming a good IGL, improving as a person, and moving away from the things that he's been removed from teams before. He talked about the other players on the team, about how they're hungry, how Dream is always boosting morale. That's something we've talked about a lot, is having a couple players, or at least one player who's on the team who is trying to always boost morale, make sure everybody's happy, make sure everybody's feeling good. Positive reinforcement, right? So this is all stuff that I've talked about on the channel. I thought this interview was really cool. Again, other people might not, but thought I'd start the video off with that. So now we'll move on. So there's a couple rules that we need to understand about attacks, and time is always against us. We need to be proactive because, again, time is always against us, and the defenders, for the most part, aren't going to give you, free kills or anything. You have to go seek those kills out. Whereas when you're on defense, you could play a little bit more passive and reactive to things. You don't have to be as proactive, but attack, you've got to be going, getting stuff done. And then this is a good rule of thumb from my military background: is shoot, move, communicate. You should always be doing one of those things, right? You should either be shooting, trying to get a pick, moving, not standing still, like getting, whatever it is, pushing, being proactive, like we're talking about. And then communicating. If you're not shooting or moving, maybe you're flank watch, maybe you're the support, whatever, you've got to be droning, getting intel, calling stuff out, whatever. So you should always be doing one of these things. And if all the players on your team are doing one of these things, then your team probably has a higher chance of being successful. Moving on from that, territory is the next big thing that I think a lot of people have a trouble understanding. Maybe they just don't think about it. I don't know. But anyway, territory, what is needed to plant? So we'll talk about that real quick. I did go through here, made just like a basic strat. I didn't really care too much. I just threw this together. I've seen this before. And then, in this case, we're going to be working with a horizontal take. So if we're talking about let's say that our end game plan is to plant, in one of these areas, right? Somewhere in maps or Volt, right? So that's where we're trying to plant. What territory do we need to get there, right? So we need, if we're doing a horizontal take, we need to take all of this territory, right? And then usually with a horizontal take, you'll have like mid or late round. Probably mid-round is when you have one or two people rotate over so that you can take control of study. So if you're trying to plant in one of these areas, for example, this is all the territory you need to try and control and gain access to in order to plant so you can be successful. So that's what we're talking about, territory. This, you need to push or kill to get to these points so that you can plant successfully. So that's the first part. Next part is dry running strat, or dry runs and creating attack strats. So many teams at the lower level, like T3, they only dry run and make strats for defense, and they never dry run and make strats for attack. And you could see that a lot of T3 teams suffer from it. There's so many T3 teams who don't, like we talked about just now, don't understand territory. They don't understand phases of attack. There's just, you could just tell they're totally uncoordinated because, again, they're not practicing this. People spend a lot of time creating defensive strats, dry running defensive strats, and usually, obviously, just because the game itself is more defense oriented, their defense goes a little bit better, but then their attacks always suffer. And I feel like a lot of teams hit their roadblocks or their walls, whatever you want to call them, on attacks, and a lot of teams can't progress to that next level because, again, they don't spend time understanding attacks, they don't spend time dry running attacks, they don't spend time creating attack strats, and so then they suffer from it, and people get frustrated, teams fall apart, whatever. There's just so many things going on there. So very important part of the process, just as important as creating, and honestly, because of attacks are harder and the game is more gauged towards defense, you should probably be spending a little bit more time on attacks, right? Because that's the harder part of the game. So if you can make your attacks strong, then your team will be that much better, right? Because it's already defender sided. So really should spend a lot of time thinking about attacks, how they should go, what needs to happen, and that's what we're going through here. Forward thinking, this is something that I use personally. I don't know if some other people talk about this, but forward thinking is basically everything we're about to go into. What are our plans, beginning, middle, and end? So in first things first is where are we planting, right? So in this case, we're looking to plant, let's say here. So that's our end game goal. That's what our future thinking is. And then the next thing would be like we're talking about going into this basic plan here. So before I go to that though, we'll talk about gears real quick. always reading situations. You might have your basic plan of where you want what you want to do, right? That's what we'll talk about that in a sec. Um, you might have your basic plan, but then things change. Either A, you've lost some crucial operators, or B, maybe in the entry here you take out the Melusi and the Jaeger right off the bat. It's 5v3. Now, when it's 5v3, do you necessarily have to go through every step of the plan? Probably not. That's where you have to reassess, change gears. Maybe you get a little bit more aggressive based on intel, blah blah blah. Like, or again, based on time. If your time is running low or you're behind schedule, then you need to change gears, get a little bit more aggressive. Whatever it is, maybe you have to change gears and become less aggressive and become a little bit more passive. So you always need to be assessing the situations, reading the board, all this stuff, change gears. All right, so moving on. We're on beginning, middle, and end. So basic plan. So again, like we talked about, our goal here is to plant vault door, and we're doing a horizontal take. So what needs to happen? So in our basic or beginning plan, phase 1, what take are we doing? So in this case, we've established we're doing a horizontal take. What ops do we need? I just threw together, a random thing here, which is not too far off. Maybe you could switch the Yana out. I know that a lot of people will bring Sledge, whatever. So what ops do we need? That also comes down to op phase, like what we see they have on the board, what we need. Do we need more explosives? Are they bringing a lot of shields? Are they bringing a lot of bulletproofs? In this case, we know we have to deal with 1 shield, 2 bubbles, 3 banshees, and 3 ADS, right? In terms of like what utility we might have to destroy or what utility might cause us problems in our process here. So what ops do we need? Where are we entering? We've already established we're doing a horizontal take, so most likely we're going to be entering, master or closet. Might get someone on Astro window at the beginning just to cut off the split here. Who knows? Like, that's what we're talking about. So that's the beginning process of our attack, is where are we entering. Next thing, where do we need prep drones? So if we're entering master or closet, and we're taking over this area, what kind of prep drones do we need in order to be successful here, right? So if we can, these are some good at the top that you can get on the rafter up here. These are some good ones to see Astro. Another one you can put that some people don't notice is up here on the statue. You can get into the cupboard over here in deer. This is all, and then obviously maybe we want probably one somewhere in master if we can. So probably only 2 drones. Most likely, just because you may not get away with, depending on the caliber of the team, you may not get away with getting too many drones up here because, assuming players are going to be running around over here, whatever, you may not be able to get away with it. So I would say, plan for 1 or 2 drones up here just to get in the building and make sure, you don't, that way you don't have to spend your whole time droning all this stuff. And then the rest of the drones you probably have to pick up at spawn, right? So now we've established some prep drones, and this is just basic, obviously you could get much more in depth with this. I'm not going to spend too much time going into all that. That's for you to do. I'm just trying to give you a basic idea. Who is droning what, right? So we know probably Ash, Zoph are going to be first going in. So we can assume that Ace is probably going to be droning. And in this case, we might have the Nomad play window here, or we might have the Nomad just follow them in. Because in this case, with the Yana on the board, we could probably have the Ace droning, one area, and then the Yana droning another area. So this is also where we need to become efficient in terms of our droning. That way we can make the most out of our time, because again, time is always against us. Attacks, you have to become pretty efficient at taking territory in a reasonable amount of time so that you can execute in a reasonable amount of time, right? So we've got our prep drones. We'll check those. Probably the Yana might come in and either way, it doesn't matter which way, but this is the type of drone path that we would be taking, and then maybe one is going to come out into couch, and then the other is going to check out deer and possibly up until boar, right? So this gets us in the building, and we might have to take these gunfights. I'm just putting them there on the table because this is standard. Maybe they bail, maybe they stay. We have to take the gunfights if they stay, whatever. So now we've looked at. I know this is going to cover the screen. So now we've established who's droning what, and then what is your jobs in this phase, right? So in this case, Ace, his job would be droning. Yana would be sending her clone, and then we know that these three are going in. So Ash is going first, Zoph is going second, and then again, that's where we need to decide pathing. Are we going to send them bathroom to Astro and then clear statue and deer that way, or are we going to send one that way and one the other way, and then probably the nomad would probably follow the one into bathroom, because as soon as we take bathroom and Astro control, she can just slap an air jab in this area, and that way we're got flank covered, right? So I think one of the more common ones I see is here. You might be able to get away with one here. I don't know. Probably not. They'll shoot it. So it's probably best to put it up here. So there we go. All right. So now we're in the building. We're moving across the map here. Again, maybe we've lost a body, maybe we've killed both, or maybe they just fled. It doesn't matter. So we're just going through what, like, a basic pathing and stuff here. All right, so we've established jobs. And then by what time do we want to accomplish step one? So in this case, we've had a good idea of what we want to do. We get in there, we start working. What time on the map do we want to try and accomplish this? I would say that depending on what we're running into, and how efficient we are and how good our gunners are at pushing and taking territory, because that's another thing in T3, less experienced entries are going to take it a little bit slower or a little bit scared to take the gunfights. More, confident entries and just more experienced entries are going to be a little bit faster and efficient at this. So what time do we want to try and finish this by? I would say sometimes you can see, depending on what kind of issues you run into over here. I mean, we can get up to this point by 2 minutes if there's not much difficulties taking this side, if they give it up pretty quick or whatever. So I would say anywhere from 2 minutes to a minute 20, right? Somewhere in that time frame is when we want to finish or accomplish our first task, which is basically taking this territory, right? So this is our first phase. We've taken this territory, we've set up some flank stuff, and now we're going to move on to the second phase. So that's what you have to think about. That's first phase, and I feel like in my experience, a lot of teams only focus on this part of the phase, or this part of the plan, right? They say, we want to plant here, we're going to do a horizontal take, and so all that's talked about in prep phase or whatever, the only thing that's established in the plan is that we're going to do a horizontal take and we're going to take this. And then now, this is where you have to understand phases of the attack. So this is the first phase, and at this point, this is where I see teams start to suffer because they stall out, because this is the only part that's talked about in the plan. It's not that they don't talk about the next parts of the attack ever, and so mid and late round they suffer from IGLing and how to progress, right? How to push that round forward. So we always do this part pretty well for the most part, and then after that, and if you're watching this, you may know that this is a common thing as well. Teams will suffer from moving on past this point, being efficient. I've seen a lot of teams where they'll get to this first phase, they'll complete it, and they'll start working on stuff after that. And because they've lost all of their IGLing and just direction, basically, they will take, let's say, like these areas, 90 and landing, and then they'll spend like a whole minute just like looking in this door or looking down this hallway, waiting for a kill to happen to them because they don't know how to push the round forward past this point. So that's why we're doing this. Next part would be mid-round phase 2, right? So hopefully we've done this all, like I said, in 2 minutes to a minute 30. So at this point, we're at mid-round in phase 2. We've taken our territory. Do we need to reassess our plan? So by that, what we mean is maybe we've lost Ash and Zoph, right? And we've got 3 people. Is it still viable to do the standard horizontal take of where we take red 90 and then have someone come over to study, right? At that point, with 3v, let's say 3v4, you probably don't have the manpower to accomplish that. So you're going to have to adapt and kind of create a new plan from there on how you can be successful. Or let's say that, like we talked about, maybe you pick off the 2 roamers, so it's 5v3 in your favor. Maybe, and that's where you reassess of, do you have to go through every step at this point? We probably still need to send someone study, because you're always going to be concerned about, like, for example, in this case, the smoke coming over and swinging this door and killing your planter or killing someone here. So this is where you always have to be constantly evaluating the strat based off of who's on the board on both sides, what's available, do you have enough manpower to do these things? So that's where that comes into play of, do we need to reassess our plan? Next thing is, again, what territory do we need next? So we've taken this top portion, right? That was phase 1. The next territory we need is landing in red and 90, right? And then this is where we probably need to rotate over someone so we can start creating pressure on study, at least 1 or 2, depending on how many bodies we have left, right? So we could leave, if we have all 5, we could do a 3-2 split where we leave 3, 1 watching flank, 1 takes red, 1 takes 90, and then 2 are coming over here to create pressure on main and study, right? So this is where we're thinking about the next portions of territory that we need, right? So that's that part. We're always assessing the plan. We're always assessing what territory we need in order to achieve our end game goal. Who is watching flank? So that would depend on what we do here. We could leave the Nomad over there. We could leave the Yana over there, or we could leave both, because in this case, if we're pushing this, we probably need Ash or Zoph to come with the Ace. That way, if we need to, we can get rid of the shield, right? If we need to, or the bubble. So that's how we establish who's going to be, because, and this is another common problem, people always think, at least in T3, that these guys, all they do is gun. I've seen so many times in T3 where these entry players won't even toss out their second drone. It's absolutely crazy to me. They all they understand is they're gunning, right? And that's where we always need to assess, which we have in here. What is my job during this phase? What is my job during this phase? What is my job during this phase? Just because you're an entry doesn't mean that your only job is to get kills, right? Entry is obviously in the beginning, entering first, either getting killed or being killed, right? And then helping your team take territory. And then, but it's also, you have to use your utility to get rid of utility. And in some cases, you may be the flank watch because, for, in this case, maybe in this phase, you don't have a job, right? You're not entering. Maybe our support and whatever have to be doing their job, so they can't watch flank at that time, so it's your job to watch flank at that time. You see what I'm saying? So you always need to assess where are you most beneficial and what can you provide to the team in each phase. All right. So who's watching flanks? That'll be established based off of what's happening, who's rotating, who's still over here, what stuff do we have at our disposal. Maybe we put another air jab wherever. I don't care. I'm just putting it on the map. So that way, this is more stuff that you'll have to establish yourself. Like I said, I'm trying to be basic and quick about this, so the video is not super long, but it is a complicated subject. So now we have flank cams on Astro. We probably need, and this is another thing that we have to assess in this phase, is where do we need intel. So we probably have, maybe we have an air jab on red or 90, who cares? And then where do we need intel? We probably need a flank cam if available on red if there's no air jab, but we probably definitely need to get a drone on 90 so that we can see long haul there, or the long classical haul here. So that's again, where do we need intel? Where do we need flanks? And who is watching flanks, right? So we established that, and then do we have adequate intel for flanks? Meaning, have we made it through first phase, and do we have enough drones to watch our flanks, right? So we probably have one drone here. At that point, we only really need one on that side, plus we have the air jab, because their only option is to come up this stairway. So as long as you have one drone over here, whether it's whichever drone, and you know about the stairs and you have the air jab, you don't really need too many other drones over here, right? So then we can put an air jab or drone or both on red, and then we definitely need a drone on hallway to see there, right? All right, so that's phase 2. Now we've accomplished setting up flanks, and look at all the territory we've gained at this point, right? So this is all of our territory. So this is over half the plan, right? We've taken all this territory. Now we're looking at phase 3, which at this point, since we've established that, either A, this is when our ace and whoever are taking statue, and we're working on gaining this territory. So you don't necessarily have to take this, but you need something to. That's why you might have 2 people here, is you need to make sure that this smoke can't push up and shoot you in the back, or when you come in to plant in, one of these places, that he can't just come in here free and take you guys out, right? So you don't necessarily have to destroy this stuff. It's if you can, it's probably best, but you just need to make sure that he doesn't have access to just push in, right? So that's probably why you have 2 people. If we bring the Nomad over here, we can look at possibly air jabbing this off, or we can just have, one person positioned. We can just have one person positioned wherever, guarding the door, while, we've got our 1 or 2 and Skull, we've got our 190, and then, we've got our ace who's getting ready to plant, right? So we've gained the territory. Now we're in late game or end game phase 3. So again, do we need to assess our plan, or reassess our plan based off of who's on the board, what's happened? Do we have the territory, or what territory do we need, which we just talked about? What is our job during this phase? It's the same thing as last round or last phase. You just need to make sure that you are doing what's needed. So in this case, we need to make sure that we're not getting flanked. But at this point, when we're getting ready to plant, depending on our air jab positions, we may not need to be on the drones actively, because we'll get a sound cue for the most part. Maybe they know how to jump over the railing, not get hit by the air jab, or maybe they can shoot it, and we may not get that audio. But for the most part, we're trusting and thinking that we're gonna know if someone tries to push us, right? So we may not have to actively watch flanks, or let's say it's a 4v3, 4v4, whatever. We have, Ash is dead. They can be flipping flank drones, right? So just need to make sure that we're covering our all of our stuff going on. What potential threats can deny the plant? So in this case, we know that there's a C4 on the Cade here. We know that there's 3 smokes or toxic babes, and then have we gotten rid of these bubbles so that they can't give intel, right? And then obviously banshees are going to be sound cue and just crowd control. So we might have to get rid of that stuff. We have to use utility to deal with this stuff, right? So that's where we're talking about what potential threats can deny the plant, right? And something that I also should have talked about, which I forgot, is which it's noted right here, is by what time do we want to accomplish phase 2? It's the same thing. You should always have a time frame in mind. That way you're keeping your team on track. So let's say, like we talked about, we want to finish this by 2 minutes, a minute 30, taking first phase. And then second phase, let's say we want to finish by anywhere from a minute to 40 seconds. You know, we're just tossing some random times out there. So let's say that that's what we want to accomplish. So we want to accomplish taking 90, controlling red, and getting into study by a minute 45 seconds, 40 seconds, somewhere in there. That way, because this is where we're talking about assessing our threats. We know that Smoke can waste, a solid 30 seconds with his Toxic Babes. And we also have to worry about a C4. So we probably want to try avoid planting at like 20 seconds or less, because we need to, they can choke us out by that, right? They can throw their Toxic Babes and stop us from entering, or if we're planting, they can throw a C4 Toxic Babe and push us out. And so if we're doing our plant at 20 seconds or less, we may not be successful, right? Our chances of success have gone down. Whereas if we're trying to plant at like the 40 or even 30-second mark, there is a little bit more room for mistake or error, right? So if our initial guy, let's say, if we're planting here and aces come this side, then we have established that ace is not going to be the planter, right? One of these players who are staying on the other side, whoever it may be, is probably going to be the one with the diffuser, so that they can just swing in and plant, right? That's going to be the thought process here. So if we're planting at, and this is where we're talking about room for error. If we're planting at 30 seconds, for example, or 40 seconds, we get our guy in, he's starting to plant, C4 flies, kills him. We're at 30 seconds, 20 seconds, somewhere in there. We have time to get aggressive now and get someone else in there to get the diffuser and try to plant, right? So it gives us a little bit of room for error, or taking into account that these things are potentially going to happen. So always got to be making sure you have some basic timestamps in your head. That way you can keep your team on track. And all that good stuff. All right, so we've reassessed the plan. We've already know what territory we need, and maybe we've already taken it. We've just talked about what is our job, basically, who's going to be planting, who's going to be holding what, how is our post plant going to be. Maybe because if we're planting here, let's say we have 5 bodies, for example, because the round is going well. This is where we might assess, like, all right, when we go to plant, we send in Ash, for example. We need you to get aggressive. That way, while we're planting, you kind of sacrifice yourself. Maybe you get a pick, but otherwise you get the attention off of the planter because they're dealing with you being a gunner and pushing in. And then maybe same thing. Maybe we've got Zofia on 90, and we want you to push 90 to create pressure and distractions from the back. So this is where you need to establish your jobs for this phase, right? There's always a specific job you can be doing in each phase, and it's not always going to be the same. And that goes into reassessing the plan. We talked about what potential threats can deny the plant, and then based off of these threats, what is our minimum time to plant, which we've already talked about. You know, if we're worrying about C4 and Toxic Babes, we probably don't. We want to try our best to avoid that 20-second or less time frame, right? So as you can see, we've covered like 3, and some attacks may have more phases because there's more steps. This is just one basic thing, and I try to make it basic of, like we talked about, beginning, middle, end. And this is where we always need to be assessing where we need drones. Again, and I kind of skipped that on this side, but you get the gist. You've got to be able to understand this stuff as well. But we've got our flank drone. We've got our other drones that are providing us intel. We need intel on the site itself, what we're dealing with. This is all part of the process, and that's all stuff that you should understand. But anyway, so we talked about beginning, middle, end. We've talked about changing gears. This is also what we're talking about if it's 5v3, right? And we're going for this plant, let's say at 40 seconds. This is where we talked about changing gears of maybe 1 or 2 players have to get aggressive here to help the plant. And that's where we're talking about changing gears of getting a little bit more aggressive, where we have Ash or Zoe or whoever, doesn't matter, get a little bit aggressive to try and help distract from the plant so we can get the plant off, while the other 3, we got the planter who would run out after plant, and then hopefully maybe we've got our 2 watching angles, right? Post plant. So that's where you got to think about changing gears of we don't want to play too passive all the time. There's going to be times where we need to get aggressive, all that stuff we've talked about already. All right, so this is just a basic understanding of attacks, just broken down into some basic phases. Like I said, there's obviously so many more things that are added to this list to make it more complicated. Communication, coordination, all this stuff. But coordination can be helped by making or doing dry runs and making strats for attack. All that good stuff. But you have to be able to read situations, change gears, forward thinking and that's also, again, what we're going to deal with, what utility we need, blah, 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 what territory, and then we've gone through all this stuff. So I'm going to stop it there. I think this covered most of it. Like I said, it is, obviously, there are more scenarios and just things that go into it, but this just gives people a basic understanding of how to do it. And again, one of the most important things is having a time frame in mind for each step, right, or each phase. That way, because again, you want to be accomplishing these things in a specific amount of time, and that way your team knows, like, all right, we're behind schedule, we need to pick up the pace, or we're ahead of schedule, maybe we can take it a little bit slower and get some intel. And again, that all goes into gears and reading situations. So thank you for your time. I hope this is helpful for some people. Enjoy your day.